You know, it's occurred to me that throughout this entire Rise of the Beast series that I've been doing, I've done all the Maximals. I did Rhinox in that one video, I did Cheetor a couple of times, and I even did Air Razor, the studio series. I also talked about it a second time, but that wasn't good for the figure to talk about it. But I never really talked about Optimus Primal. I did mention him in my Rhinox video, but it was just the weaponizer toy for him, or whatever you want to call it. None of the actual Primal figures. Well, there's a reason for that. The Voyager figure itself is widely considered of being one of the best core figures. However, it is also quite rare, as most of the core figures outside of the 3-packs were not sold in the United States, which is why so many of them are fucking expensive. And then there's the Studio Series, which was the last Maximal made, so when you look at it like that, yeah, it makes sense that I got to Optimus Primal last, but now I'm going to make up for it, because I don't know if anyone else has done this, they probably have, but we're going to be comparing the two. The Voyager Core Optimus Primal, if he can stand, I guess, and the Studio Series. So, comparing these two is very funny, because it really shows you that when you don't upscale something like you should, it really does show where the budget goes, because this guy was about $30, and this one was $55. It really does remind me of comparing the old Galvatron toy from Age of Extinction to the Studio Series. Like, man, what was the span of time between these two figures being released? Like, less than a year? And wow, you really can see where your money's going with this new one, right? But that's kind of what is tricky about comparing them, because unlike the Rhinox, which one of them was based off of concept art that was not used in the movie at all, and the other one looks exactly like how he does in the film, these both look like how he did in the movie. It's just, one does I'm going to be blunt about this, much better job at it. But it's still not a fair comparison, because one's $30 and the other is $55. So, yeah, it's a bit weird, but we're still going to do it anyways.
Oh, you can't see.
Let's take a look at this guy. I like upfront Primal. I don't like him crawling on all fours. I like bipedal monkeys. I don't know. Makes them a bit more uncanny, I guess. However, of all the Optimus Primals released in recent years, I'd say this guy probably does it the least effective. I mean, Kingdom Primal had some weird-looking legs, but, you know, he was stockier, which is accurate. This guy just looks like a human, but with a monkey head. And, you know, it does look fairly good on its own, but it also looks kind of cheap compared to, you know, yeah, so he does have weapons. He's got, of course, his swords, which, despite the fact that I think he only used them in the show, like, maybe once, maybe twice. The standard choice of weapon for Primal, even though he uses his blasters and shoulder cannons way more. But hey, who am I to turn down the choice of monkeys with swords? I love monkeys. They're far from the coolest animals, but holy shit, they're funny. I don't even know why. They should be scary, because they almost look like us, but they don't. But they're fucking funny as hell. But yeah, this guy does take a lot of inspiration from the Kingdom figure, including this giant butt flap and a large part of the engineering. Fairly standard with all of these core figures. It's basically just the Kingdom toys, but a little cheaper, and obviously they're trying to look more realistic, with the exception, of course, with one figure, which I will talk about later. So it's not much of a surprise here, and I gotta say, they did an effective job at it. Not amazing, but effective. But, I mean, when you compare it with this guy, it's not even a contest. Dare I say it? This is the better of the two modes, because it looks straight out of the movie, like that head sculpt and paint applications. So fantastic, and the rest of the texture work is immaculate. Of course, they also got his proportions down perfectly compared to that guy. And I can't even give him all of his weapons, because, believe it or not, despite the fact that he has more of them right now, and he already has too many to hold with two hands, That's not even all of them. He also has this... Oh, split in half. Cool. He also has this chain. I'm pretty sure this is supposed to go with your battle trap. But I don't have that figure. It's the one character I don't have for some reason. It's because they only ever made one toy. And by the time I wanted it, he's now expensive and sold out everywhere. So that's cool. But I mean... It kind of reminds me of... And again, I mentioned this last video... But monkey with chain, does that remind anyone else of that old Animorphs toy of Marco the Gorilla, who had a giant chain for his weapon? I actually kind of like that toy. I know people really hate Animorphs, but that one, if you repainted it brown, would basically be a transforming George, the 8-figure from Rampage. And because it looks like an old 80s toy, but with more articulation, even better. And also, that guy... has a weird-looking human mode, but that's accurate to the game, so I'm getting off topic, but when else am I going to talk about that figure? Anyways, he also has this port key. I don't remember what it was called. It's nice, but you know they only gave this to Optimus just because it's like, he still doesn't really feel like a leader. Quick, just throw in that fucking stupid item from that stupid movie. Yeah, there you go. Now he's worth leader price, right? Is he? When it comes to these other weapons, I think this is also not meant for Primal, which is a shame because Axe Monkey is definitely a look. I think this is supposed to be for Prime, now that I think about it. But his actual weapons are, of course, he also has his swords. I don't know why Optimus Primal nowadays doesn't really have guns. Beast Machines Primal didn't really have that, because Beast Machines is like Star Wars droids when it came to weapons, aka fucking garbage. But also, this guy doesn't have guns. None of the Rise of the Beast Maximals had guns. I'm just lucky Kingdom characters had guns.
Well, mostly.
It's kind of a bitch grip, but I mean, all you have to do is use the articulated fingers, and he holds them fairly well. Also, these swords were not made for these hands because of the engineering, which is a pretty cool sentence to say. But yeah, I mean, it does look quite nice. One more thing to compare between... God damn it. One more thing to compare between these two before we get to the articulation and comparisons. I guess we already did do accessories, which I usually do after articulation. Oops! Nobody gives a shit. I do want to talk about the back of the legs because some people have brought this up as an issue, specifically for this guy, but I want to talk about it because I have a controversial opinion. You see, they're very clean here, which I'll admit, cool engineering, but number one, you know the issue, right? Number two, I don't think these are actually as clean as most people say because there's still a bunch of robot gunk back here. Which, you know, isn't that what most people complained about when it comes to the Beast Wars versions of Optimus Primal, not the Rise of the Beasts ones? I mean, I know these are robot gorillas, but I mean, still does look very distracting. It's a completely different color. I mean, it's not an issue. It's not really an issue, but I mean, I don't think these back of the legs are as good as most people say they are. And this guy also has some junk when it comes to the back of the legs, but people really seem to dislike these, but honestly, I feel like they fill out the shape perfectly fine. And guys, every single Optimus Primal has kibble on the back of the gorilla legs. The Masterpiece did, the original toy did, this one even does, and this one has been bragged about for not having it. So, like, is this really a deal breaker? No, you fucking goofballs. I'd even argue that they look less distracting because, like I said, they blend into the leg and fill out the silhouette a lot better. But also, drastically different colors. You know, these stand out. It's bright and silver. It looks cool, but I mean, doesn't really look that clean for the alt mode. But this, it's not that distracting. It's the same color as the foot, so I don't know. It just looks like he shaved the back of his legs for some reason. All right, let's get to articulation. This guy has a head that can look left and right, but you have to move it upwards first, but yeah. Oh, this guy's funny. You know what I just realized? I mean, comparing the two, I forgot to mention that this guy kind of looks like one of those old Aldi soap dispenser, like 3 points of articulation toys. You know what I'm talking about? Compared to this guy. But also, the proportions of this guy makes him look like that one Submechanophobia King Kong animatronic. You know what I'm talking about? And yeah, it's kind of funny. Anyways, back to your articulation. You can look up a decent amount, and obviously left to right, but it's a little limited because of how it's jointed. Shoulders rotate all the way around. They go out that far, and these shoulder pads do move along fairly nicely with the arm, but it does look a little droopy when you move it out all the way, so there's that. He's got a bicep swivel, a decent bend in the elbow. Some people might complain about the gap, but y'all complain about way too much stupid shit. Get the fuck up! He does have wrist articulation. Nice. And that's where his articulation kind of drops off. I mean, he technically does have a waist swivel, but I don't think that's very useful. His hips are pretty bad. You have to move this forward, which looks ugly. And you can move it forward that far, not even that far, and then, yeah. And then I guess you can move it back that far. But with his extended legs, you'd think that would allow for more articulation, but nope. No knee bending backwards. It's mostly for the robot mode. And you can do this for a mode we will talk about in just a second. So yeah, mostly just hips. They don't even work that well in this mode. And then he's got the saddest ankle pivots. I'm not even gonna try to pose his ankles as far as they can go because I mean, I'm basically doing it right now. Articulation on that guy is fine for beast mode, but like his anatomy, you'd probably expect a little bit more, but it's okay. Now let's compare him to this guy. Left and right, beautiful. It does have its limit. Actually, no, it doesn't. Oh, cool. Go wild. It goes up all the way. Kind of an ugly exposed socket, but not really that much of an issue. What does look a little weird is his jaw. It's not painted the same as the rest of his head, and it has an obvious seam line, but I guess that's the price you pay for jaw articulation. Shoulders rotate all the way around, and they can go out all the way. And he does have a beautiful butterfly joint. Not even for engineering or transformation, just because monkey. Bicep swivel, and he does have a bend in the elbow, but it does look a little awkward because of this piece. He has decent wrist articulation, and he has 2 joints of finger articulation, which is beautiful. Now, obviously, because, I mean, just look at that waist. No waist articulation, but he does have hips that are not much better than that guy's. Gonna be honest, they also don't go back, like, at all. They go out pretty well, I'll admit. But that's pretty much it. I mean, you do get some ankle articulation here, but, I mean, do you expect this to articulate that much? It's a crimped up robot leg. Probably not. While I won't show spread legs because of the lack of an ankle pivot, what I will show instead is the quadrupedal monkey look. This actually isn't too bad, and when you bend the legs, it does blend in with this butt flap beautifully, and this is obviously the mode he was supposed to be in. Whereas this is a bit of an afterthought. I mean, you can use the butterfly joint to help aid in posing, but with the back kibble, I mean, you could probably push it a little more. Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't really want to go farther, despite the fact that it looks like it does. These hips, I mean, you can move this joint here. It's just a little bit more forced than this one, which is just so much more natural. So, hey, you know what? He's got the better quadrupedal mode. You get one, buddy. Let's get some comparisons. First, let's get good old Cheetor. Here's the mainline one, and here's the Studio Series. I should probably move these back, shouldn't I? Like I said, it's interesting the dynamic that the core line and the Studio Series went, with these being the original designs but more realistic looking, while these actually looking like how they did in the movie. But it's funny to see that despite all of that, these guys are basically the same design, except one's very clearly better. Let's also bring in Rhino Boy. Good old Rhinox. And I just realized how small this guy is compared to the other. Yeah, Voyager. Totally. I mean, it still is, but, you know. A comparison that hasn't been complete yet, we have Air Razor with the main line right here, and you don't want to stand up, which is annoying. Come on. Really? Come on. And here's the good old Studio Series. Well, old maybe. Good. Not so much. Just stand up, Air Razor. Come on, man. I don't know why that doesn't want to focus on, but whatever. Maybe you realize that figure's so ugly, it's not worth the effort. But yeah, interesting to see all the Rise of the Beast Maximals. Old, well, core, and new, well, Studio Series. Well, actually, now I think about it, most of these came out first. I mean, they were supposed to come out first, so I guess that makes sense. I guess it really is old versus new. Not even the newest old figure that I've shown on old versus new, so I guess it makes sense. And finally, this is going to be a bit interesting, but we have the core Optimus and the Studio Series Scourge. That's kind of cool, right? Now, I don't have the Studio Series one of this guy because it's a buzzworthy Bumblebee figure, which means it's a Target exclusive. And I've never seen one. And they never made a core version of this guy. They have other toys, but they're like children's gimmick toys. I mean, never stopped me, but I mean, still. Why do I own this? So when it comes to most aspects, it's pretty obvious that this one is much better. I mean, the paint application's much better. The sculpt work is phenomenal. Its articulation is even a little bit more fun. Its quadrupedal mode looks a little weaker, but like, I like displaying Primal standing upwards, so not even much of an issue. And the whole thing is, I really liked this design for Optimus Primal because you still have a lot of character in this ape mode, and that's kind of the whole thing with the original. Sure, he looks kind of butt ugly, but there's so much personality behind that face. And while it's not the same personality, this still looks pleasant. Whereas this, it does look kind of cool. Like I said, it looks like a giant animatronic monkey, but, I mean, obviously this one's much better, so... I mean, you'd expect this one to be better. You're paying a lot more money for it, so, you know, it is better, but no surprises. Speaking of no surprises, let's get to the transformation. This
Shit for our roommate's door, huh?
fucking turn. This one's a bit interesting. There's 3 sections of the transformation. It's actually quite complex for an Optimus Primal transformation. So I'm going to start here, then go here, and then finally end here. So, to avoid paint chipping around here, you do have to rotate this hand around in a specific order. So, rotate this around first and then push down on the fingers. It's kind of weird, like there's a couple of minor hinges that kind of push both this and this part of the leg around depending on, like, I think, yeah, pushing this pushes this down and also messes with this. It's very unusual, but still pretty cool. Yeah. Don't clip your nails before transforming this guy. Okay, so now I'm going to transform back into ape mode, obviously, but I'm going to do it in a different order. Start with the arms, then do the legs, and then do the head. Just to show that you can really do this transformation in any order you want, which is pretty cool. Okay, so again, you're going to rotate this first, then rotate this. Then you're going to clip this in place, and then you rotate the hand back. And you might also want to flip out the fingers when you have the best option and opportunity available. Oh, I didn't need to snap it in. Cool. So, that was the transformation. This guy, nothing really to say. I mean, he's got a couple of neat things, like this flap folding inside of the chest, and also how the legs are transformed, but otherwise, he's pretty standard for Optimus Primal, which is fine, but I have to say something. My issue with Optimus Primal Transformers is Optimus Primal is kind of like Pokemon games before they were on console. You know, they were great, they were fun, but they were also safe. They're some of my favorite games ever made, yes, but also no surprises, or if there were, very few and far between. This made it consistent, but also kind of uninteresting. Optimus Primal falls into the same area that a lot of other characters do, like Kickback or Beachcomber, where they don't really have to try with the engineering because the original is already so good that there's only a couple of things they can do. Now, mind you, that's not really an issue, because as long as the transformation is fun and both modes look great, it's still a good toy. I'm not trying to say that Optimus Primal toys are doomed to fail. That's not it, but you know, whenever I review an Optimus Primal, unless like the execution of how both modes look, like the masterpiece, are so extraordinary, I'd never put anything into like an S category, because S doesn't necessarily mean better than A. But in order to get into like an S tier, there has to be a little extra spice, something to push it over the edge, and that's usually where the engineering comes in. And while I'm not trying to say this guy's automatically an S tier or the best Optimus Primal toy ever, I mean, there are times where Optimus Primal has experimented and it was like the one time Optimus Primal had a bad toy. All I'm saying is, I very, very much appreciate that this guy's engineering is actually complex, well thought out, and interesting. That's not something you can say for your average, everyday Optimus Primal toy. So, good on you, Hasbro. That's very impressive. But again, this is a $50 toy that's basically a Voyager, so you kind of expect that, right?
Give me a gun! Give me a gun right the fuck now and...
So, now it's time to talk about the robot mode, and again, it's no contest. This is a cool looking robot mode and all, but like, Optimus Primal's robot mode in the movie was, he had this very fit anatomy. Like, he had the thin waist, it's kind of hard to describe, but he was very lean, is all I'm trying to say. And this guy's kind of chunky. Why is that? Well, they decided to represent his entire waist with this one flap, and everything else is just all chunk. He also has no neck, so he looks kind of funny. But as for this guy, well, he captures it perfectly. And keep in mind, he had a very robust ape mode. So all of this just makes it more, oh my god, impressive that he managed to pull it off. And he did it. And the way he shifts his mass around is really cool. I'm talking about the fact that his incredibly well-built body has taken all of the fat away and combined it into the back. I forgot to transform this back. Fuck. By having the monkey belly flip up and being hid away by this extra back kibble, which was all of the fat of here. Now, this may look messy, but the big back has always been a character design for Optimus Primal. So the fact that they just took all of that away and shrunk it all, put it all in one place, just looks excellent. His arms, too, they were fairly spread out when it came to the bulk in the monkey mode, and he also had giant hands, but now he's got small hands, and all of the mass has formed into just the brachioradialis. By the way, may I mention that that is one of the most obnoxious words to pronounce, holy fucking shit. And makes him look a lot more powerful, because now it looks like he packs more of a punch. I also like how his legs spread out. All fantastic. Though I do have to say, one thing that is a really huge missed opportunity is that I do miss the mask. I know that Optimus Primal has always had this weird creepy mouth, but I feel like his build was really complete with the mask over his mouth. It was such a cool cherry on top to the excellent design, but with the mouth it just makes him look a little bit, I don't know, creepy almost. That's what I'm trying to say. His gorilla mode wasn't really creepy, but this robot mode definitely looks a little uncanny. Whereas this guy, that mask and head sculpt overall looks fantastic. And I gotta be honest, while the build of this one doesn't look nearly as good as this, and there's not much else to talk about because it's just the gorilla, but I guess now he's got shinier legs. But the bulkier build and this mask does make him look at least more appealing than this one. This one's more accurate, and it's very impressive, but this one looks cooler, so whenever I get an Optimus Primal, I feel more drawn to this one than this one, despite this one still being a really cool toy. So, it's kind of weird. Like, objectively, this one's way better, but I actually think this one is a cooler looking robot, so yeah, interesting. If this guy had the proper head sculpt, I probably would prefer him, so I don't know. It's just a shame. This is a leader class figure, and they didn't give him an alternate head sculpt. The Bumblebee had an alternate head sculpt. That figure sucks ass. You're telling me that this $50 one couldn't do that? Now, granted, that Bumblebee, way too small for his price point, so I guess that makes sense, but I mean, still would have been nice to have. Now, let's go over articulation first before accessories, like a proper reviewer. This guy's head's on a ball joint, can look left and right, obviously. Up and down's very limited. He does have some pretty good left and right. That's impressive. I didn't know that up until just 2 seconds ago. Cool. Shoulders rotate all the way around, though I don't really like these shoulder pads. They're permanently drooped, and that's because these sections get caught onto the arm, so they can't go any higher. It's kind of unfortunate. I wish that wasn't really the case, because they do look a little less worse than the normal shoulder pads that Primal is known for. Anyways, bicep swivel. He still has that okay elbow bend that has the gap that I don't care about, but I continue to bring up, so I actually do care about it. Wrist articulation, and now, I mean, he still has the butt flap, but he does still have a very nice waist articulation, waist joint. What the? And because he doesn't also have the skirt flap, looks way nicer. Hips go forward that far and back that... Oh, there it is. Back that far. They go all the way out. That almost looks like a ball joint, like a really scrawny ball joint. Like, if the standard ball joint on Transformers is like a GameCube analog stick, then that looks like a Nintendo 64 analog stick, but it's not a ball joint. That's kind of funny. He does have a thigh swivel, but it's pretty limited. It goes more inwards than out. That's interesting. He actually has a proper knee this time, and it's actually incredible, so yeah, that's cool. And he does have the smallest of pivots. And with his widest stance, you're looking at it. I didn't even try with this guy, and he still has a wider stance.
Oh, that sucks.
As for this guy's posability, his head is on a ball joint, and it obviously is a little better. It goes up and down, but left and right, doesn't have any left and right. Barely any, so that's kind of a shame. Shoulders rotate all the way around. There is a butterfly joint, but now it goes the opposite way. I guess you can do that pose, but his shoulder pads do kind of ruin it, so I mean, cool. Speaking of his shoulder pads, you can move them out all the way if you so desire, but his shoulder pads also do look kind of stupid, so I mean, well, I mean, at least you can do that. They still don't look quite as good as the Kingdom or that guy's shoulder pads, if his actually worked, is what I'm trying to say. However, because of this shoulder pad, his shoulders can go out a ridiculous degree. Actually, that's pretty standard. That's not ridiculous. Bicep swivel. And a slightly better elbow bend. Also a lot cleaner. I keep saying that it's not important, but I keep bringing it up like a fucking dumbass. Maybe it is important, and I'm just in denial. Wrist articulation, and he still has the 2 finger joints, which is always nice and appreciated. He also has a waist swivel, but because there are no butt flaps, because it's all up here like it should be, it's a lot easier to access. Hips go forward that far, back. Hips go all the way out, maybe even more. Yeah, ooh, impressive. A much better thigh swivel. Doesn't even go inwards, but that's okay. He does have a knee bend, but you do have to hold it here, which is a bit annoying, but not too bad. But he does have a much worse knee bend, so that's a little unfortunate. However, he does have forward and back with his ankles and an actual fucking pivot. And working in conjunction With both the hips and the ankles, this is his widest stance with both feet flat on the floor. Not quite perfect like Rhinox, but still
Happy.
So articulation. He's got better knees, but he's got better almost everything else. Also, his head goes side to side. So, yeah, he has the better articulation. Obviously, I mean, side to side, totally the most important joint. As for accessories, again, it's kind of unfair. He just has the swords, and they're very dainty and gray, but they are effective. So, I mean, not what you would expect for Optimus Primal swords. They are looking a little sad, but especially compared to how buff he is otherwise. He's more of a weapon than his actual weapons. That's kind of funny. But hey, still appreciated. This guy, on the other hand, has actual meat to his swords, because he knows what he's talking about. He is a leader. And there's a couple of ways you can go about it. You can just do this, which do look fairly nice, but you can also introduce this chain. And it is cool that he can do this at all, but to be honest, never really cared for this accessory. It's just kind of agitating, and it fights with me every step of the way. It's mostly because a lot of the joints, they just, I don't know, they don't work as well as I wish they could. And they also pop off here, here, and here. So, yeah, not very natural when it comes to posing. I mean, does that look good? Does that look good? But that's the most natural you can get it. You can't curve it anymore, because if you do, well, it didn't split, but it's about to. So, yeah, I mean, it's still looking a little flat. Oh, there you go. Cool idea. Not really a particular fan. You can also have him hold both swords in one hand, because they do peg together. And that's a decent look, but I don't think this looks nearly as good as Cheetor doing it, or even like Airraiser, the core figure. I don't know, I feel like this guy doesn't look tribal enough to pull off the staff look. And the way the swords are shaped, it just looks a little goofy. But hey, now you can actually have him hold both the swords and the axe, which is nice. But that's really the only reason I would ever have him hold his swords like this. Or his best weapon of all time, the stupid MacGuffin that I forget the name of, because Rise of the Beast, it wasn't that good, actually. Come on. You're supposed to split it in half. Don't really have that much luck with it. You can't even hold it that well. It's cool to have, but I almost lost it, so shows you how much I care about this, huh? Now, obviously, accessories goes to this guy, because he's a $50 figure despite being the same height as a normal Voyager. This guy's actually pretty short for a Voyager, so... Eek. But, I mean, even putting aside all of the extra shit that I'm not a particular fan of, other than maybe the axe, his main weapons still look a lot better than whatever these are supposed to look like. So, yeah, it's a total wipeout, even with the context in mind. Now, as for comparison, we're going to bring back in Cheetor, because of course we are, with the Mainline, and he looks so out of place compared to these two. But, fret not, because balance is restored with the Studio Series. Actually, no, that's not it at all. These three all look movie accurate, this guy doesn't. But now we actually will restore peace with Rhinox, because this isn't movie accurate at all. But you know who is? This guy, who's, I still think, my favorite of the group, but that is pretty close, because now it's time to bring in one of my favorites. You know her, Airraiser. And yeah, I mean, this does look really cool. And then you have this one. Neat. Funnily enough, she's almost the same height as the Voyagers, so... yeah, these Studio Series are pretty big, if nothing else. So, I mean, you kind of see the different philosophies when it comes to these. These are big, accurate, well-detailed toys, whereas these are a different interpretation of a hypothetical Beast Wars movie that, well, exists in this universe, but I said hypothetical, idiot. So, yeah, despite the fact that I basically have 8 toys of essentially 4 characters, I'm happy to have all of them. And finally, to bring it all home, Mainline Optimus Prime, who's also pretty tiny. Huh, that's pretty interesting. And also, good old Scourge. Let me just put him back here to show that, yeah, he's actually fairly big for a leader. I don't know. I feel like this guy is worth the $50 more than this guy, even with all of his extra shit. because this guy, I mean, he's pretty tall, so, you know, it just makes him look a lot more imposing. But, you know, main hero, main villain, and in between, I mean, they're still good guys, but I mean, the 3 factions all represented here. Pretty awesome. So, yeah, I still think this is my favorite toy. No, not you. This guy's still one of my favorite Rise of the Beast figures. But as for these 3, they're also pretty nice. And that's pretty much all there is to say. Overall, which one is better? Well, I mean, this guy is pretty much your standard run-of-the-mill Optimus Primal. The only difference is now he looks a little bit more realistic. He basically has no surprises, no new tricks. He's Optimus Primal, the easiest character to ever get right. I mean, he's a robot that's anatomically accurate, and then he turns into a gorilla. Yeah, of course he's going to be the easiest character to ever get right. But this guy, on the other hand, despite also being fairly accurate in both modes, actually has a lot to offer. And this one surprised me, because I usually don't expect that from Optimus Primals, but this guy really went above and beyond. But then again, he's also a much more expensive figure, so not only are you paying for the extra paint applications and weapons, you're also paying for a much more interesting and engaging engineering process. Why do I keep calling it engineering? It's transformation, you fucking pretentious cocksucker. So in a weird roundabout way, yeah, this guy doesn't really pull any surprises because, well, he does go above and beyond what you would expect for standard Optimus Primal. Because he's more expensive, you expect him to be unexpected. That's all kind of weird. Anyways, they're both good toys. If I had to recommend one, I mean, it'd be kind of tough to say, considering that this one's $30 and this one's $50. However, this guy is pretty expensive. I don't remember how much I paid for him, maybe like $40? So, yeah, they're not going to release him anytime soon, most likely. I hope I'm proven wrong. So, I mean, if you're going to pay extra, you might as well go all out. Just get the Studio Series. But, I mean, if you have the option, they're both pretty great Primals, as expected. Alright, I make a comment about how Optimus Primal doesn't have a neck, so I'm just going to be making a me gunner joke because she also doesn't have a neck. Alright, good. Saves her. Oh no. Oh no. Deviant. Bro, I get Gardevoir. What the fuck is this shit? It's a me. Alright, she's kind of hot outside of the fact she doesn't have a neck, though.